Okay, so let's open this file. For the purpose of this small exercise, we don't need anything. What we're going to do is start a web server, the one that is built in with the JDK. It's called HTTP server. Okay, so we are connected to the repo, and I'm going to start a server, our web server. It needs a handler and an options mat with the port, and the handler. Okay, so let's define the handler here. What is a handler? A handler is a function that takes a request and returns a response. So what is a response? A response is a map with a status, a body, and now we have a handler. So we can okay, the reason I put the handler as the var, actually, that's because I can make changes to the server without restarting it or without stopping it. See? So I don't need to do much to see the changes, they are instant. So the topic for today is routing, and what I want to show you here is on what premise the routing in Ring application is built, knowing that we only have one place where to do it, which is in the handler. Before we continue, I want to just import a utility function from a Ring so that I can create responses easily. So instead of returning a map, handwritten map, I can just type like this, response. See? So I want to do routing inside my handler, right? So remember, the request is a map which has a URI field. Okay, so if I type here foo, okay, so I can route here on the URI. If the URI is foo, type response, foo response, if the URI is a bar, type bar response. Can do baz as well. So now, yeah, so this is a problem, to do like this. Okay, so now I'm doing routing, right? So if I have no match, I can do response no match. A, B, C, no match. That's routing in a nutshell, right? Okay, so what is the problem here? The problem is that this is closed. This is a closed system, right? In case I want to add a route, how do I do that? My handler is closed, can't do that. You want to be able to add routes on the initial handler, because, for example, you might want to use a library that offers its own routing for its own functionality, an e-commerce library or authentication library. They all have their own routes, and you should be able to import them easily or use them easily, integrate them easily in your existing handler. So I would argue that there is one feature of routing libraries which is fundamental, more fundamental than all the rest, because you have many features. You can have conflict resolution and bidirectionality and stuff like that. But the main feature of a routing library is the ability to combine handlers for this purpose of using routing from other libraries. You might architecture your system in many ways where handlers end up in different places, and you need to combine them at the last moment when you pass on the handler to the web server. How are you going to achieve that? So this is what I'm going to show you now. We'll call this handler 1. Momentarily, I will put this here so that okay, so now I'm going to define a handler 2. And what we want to do is combine them. So now it's the handler 2. Okay, so now I switched the handlers, and now it knows how to reply to C, but now it lost the ability to match foo or bar or bars. And what I want to do is create a function that combines those handlers. Right, so I'm going to call it combine handlers. And what do I know already? I know that it will receive as input handlers, right, which are to be combined. So this is my signature. And what I also know is that it needs to return a handler, because ultimately this is going to be to go into the slot that the web server accepts, which is a handler. And remember, what is a handler? A handler is a function that accepts a request and returns a response, right? So I don't know what the response will be, but this is where I need to do the magic. So we want to combine handler 1 and handler 2. How are we going to do this? We don't need to bring in new functionality. All we need to do is exercise those functions and see whichever one responds, right? That's all we need to do. So we can just pass in the request in the handler sequentially and see if there is a happy response. Of course, we don't need this one. This would short circuit the whole exercise, the last default case of a no match response, because this would jeopardize all our operation. We need to know if there is no response, return a nil. That's how Compojure does it. That's how we're going to do it here as well. So that's a convention, right? See, if there is no match, return nil. And now we can just exercise those handlers sequentially and see if they respond, and voila. So how are we going to do this? Well, let's go back to the REPL, and let's first bring in another kind of neat library that can help us. It's the mock library. It's the mock ring. I think it's a ring mock. Yeah, this one, ring mock. This will allow us to generate bogus requests, so I can show you how we're going to make this logic that we agreed for the combining handlers. So mock request, and then the method, and then the URI. Okay, so something like that. So that generates a request map. I can now exercise my handlers with this mock request. So this works. This returns nil because bar works, baz works, but C doesn't work. However, handler 2, B and A. Okay, so the way to explain this best, I think, will be to do a small detour through a couple of core library functions. There is a function in the core library called SummerFan. SummerFan takes a set of predicates and returns a function that returns the first logical true value returned by one of its composing predicates against any of its arguments. So let me show you what it means. SummerFan even x. I have two predicates. One is my number even. The other one is x smaller than 3. This SummerFan returns a function which I can then apply to an argument. It will check all the predicates, and if there is any predicate that returns a true, it will return true. So, in other words, 2 is true because 2 is smaller than 3. 3 is false because false is not even and it's not smaller than 3. That's the idea of SummerFan. It takes a series of predicates. Here, even. That's one predicate. Second predicate is x smaller than 3. You can also write it in the shorthand method, maybe you prefer it like this. Okay, so this is the same thing. It doesn't try any other predicates. That's the main, that's also important. If any of these predicates return true, it won't go to the next one because we already know that's true, it's fine. Now let's go back to this function which is not written yet. We know that combined handlers need to return a handler, and we know that a handler is a function that takes a request. What we want to do is to check the handlers that we are going to pass into it if we have a match. So the request can be here, the argument to SummerFan, and the predicates, they can be the handlers themselves. If you look at the handlers, they might not be predicates, but because they return nil when there is no match, this is falsy. And in the context of SummerFan, it's good enough. It can act as a predicate because if there is a match, it will return a value which is truthy, and nil if there is no match, so that's falsy, making it very compatible with our SummerFan function. So we are going to pass in handler 1 and handler 2, and this returns a function that we can call our handler. And now we can pass in a request and here I'll try foo, which is fine, bar, baz, A, B, and C. And if there is no match, I get nil. Okay. What did we manage to do here? We managed to create the function that we need with basically one core library function called SummerFan. And that is all we need. So now we can fill in the blanks. If I try here SummerFan handlers, and then the request, we are almost there. There's only one problem, is that because I don't know how many handlers arguments there are going to be, I need to use the apply function. This signature means any number of handlers, right? And handlers is a list. So if you want to flatten this list when you pass it to SummerFan, you need to use apply. Okay? And then we have the same result as this. This is what it's going to do. Okay, so now we're ready to try it out, right? What I need here now, I'm going to pass in, I'm going to combine handler 1 and handler 2. So now, foo, bar, baz, A, B, and C. It works. Now, D, what will happen with D? We know it's not a match. That's an error, right? So we might want to fix that as well by, for example, having one handler that returns no match. We try to find a match first with the first handler, then the second handler. So order matters. So I want in last position a handler which responds with 404. To get rid of the error, or to have a no match option. So that's it. No match is applied. So we can sum it up. This is our code. Let's remove here one option here so that it makes it's even easier. We started out with one handler, and then we realized that we needed the ability to combine handlers. It's something so fundamental that Compojure, actually the name Compojure comes from composing, right? And Compojure builds itself as a routing library that allows you to build web applications from smaller parts. That's exactly the idea. The combine handles function, the function that allows us to do this magic, is actually called routes in Compojure. It uses sum and not SummerFan, which is slightly different, but it's basically the same idea. Then here it applies the routing function on the request and the handle. So it looks a little bit different, but it's exactly the same thing. You will see also two arities, 1 and 2. You will see that handlers now have two signatures. They have a one single arity, and then they have a 3 arity for asynchronous communication, and that is compliant with the servlet spec in Java, and makes Ring compatible with Java technologies and Java web servers. We are combining handlers for the single arity. This is it, and you can see it's also one line. It's apply routing request handlers. When routing is a helper function that does it in this way, it's slightly different. But rated, the module of rated that does Ring routes, if you look at the single arity, then you see single arity is defined as apply SummerFan handlers, which is exactly what we've done here. Apply SummerFan handlers. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.